Good afternoon from London. My name is Vikas Pota, and on today's live stream, I bring someone who I admire greatly. The subject of leadership is quite important to me, and we all recognize the importance of it given the times that we live in. And if there's one person in the education sector that actually espouses what I think is amazing leadership, is a lady called Yasmine Sherif. Yasmine is the executive director of an entity called Education Cannot Wait, which is focused on providing education and funding education in conflict zones in particular. And prior to COVID, we all know that the refugee crisis and the situation with regards to conflicts and children in conflicts was quite out of hand, actually. And so the work that she and her entity do are something that I am hugely grateful for. But more importantly, what I wanted to use today's live stream for was not just to bring you what their work is, but actually, given that I am a deep admirer of Yasmin's leadership, what are the lessons of leadership that she's learned through her journey? But welcome, Yasmin. Without further ado, I want to connect you to the audience over here. Tell us a little bit, Yasmin, about your experience in lockdown personally first.
Well, what is happening to the world is a tragedy, and it's another crisis upon another crisis that has already been there now for a long time. But in my personal experience is that you work remotely, and instead of cursing the darkness, you have to light a candle and see the positive of the situation. And I think that's also how my team sees it. We travel less, therefore we can work more. We become more cost effective. We can stay focused on our work because we're not rushing around, and we get more time also to internal reflection and thinking strategically. So we're trying to take advantage of it also from a professional and a strategic way to maximize our efforts. You need to think also. You can't just be running around, and I think the lockdown allows you that space to think.
I fully agree with you. But tell me, in terms of especially for the benefit of those people watching this, Yasmin, tell us about the status of refugees today in the world and the work of ECW in particular. If you could provide like an overview of those people who perhaps haven't heard of you or heard of your organization, what is the state of play today?
Well, the world is in a very difficult state of play, and I think when you look around today, in terms of, first of all, we have about 70 million refugees and internally displaced. I mean, these are people who have been forced to flee their homes, and those who become refugees have been forced to cross international boundaries as a result of armed conflict. And those who are internally displaced have been forced to flee within their country. They not cross the boundary. There are 70 million of them, of whom half are children and youth who are school-aged. And it's the biggest refugee movement, a migration movement since the Second World War. So that says something. Instead of moving towards peace and security in the world, we are actually moving towards increased conflict, increased casualties, a spread of conflict regionally and now also globally affecting us. What happens in another continent today will affect all of us, whether we sit in the UK, Sweden, France, the US. And you see it during COVID-19 that the divide in the world has been laid bare by COVID-19, economically, in terms of education, inequity. I think we're in a very bad state of the world today, not what we had envisaged in 1945 when the UN was created.
And so in terms of, tell us about the work that your Education Cannot Wait actually does on the ground.
Yeah, we are a global fund. So we don't implement programs. We are not present in country, but we are a fund that is there to mobilize political support for education, for refugees, internally displaced, and other crisis affected. We are there to catalyze funding so that we increase resources for education. A few years ago, 2.4% of funding to education in crisis, that was the amount out of all other allocations that were made. 2.4% for education. That is so important for humanity and shaping the future, because you are shaping the minds and the souls and the hearts of a new generation, and we are only willing to put aside 2.4% for that. So we worked on increasing that figure, and I think just before COVID-19 we hit about 4.3%. So that has been a positive development. We are also there to bring everyone to work together. We call it joint programming, coordination, collaboration. The business of helping others in conflict and crisis cannot be a business of ego and agency, belonging and competition. In the word of helping, we have to transcend that ego and those divisions. So that's another aspect of our work. A fourth is the localization agenda, to bring and empower local actors, not just the governments, but civil society and communities. And the fifth is to really achieve learning outcomes and quality. It's not just extinguishing a fire or filling holes, but to actually ensure that there's a 12-year of quality education that can then take the youth and the children further to sustainable livelihoods or continued tertiary education. So as a fund, we use resources to leverage these systemic changes. We are very driven by what is happening in country. So we are not a big bureaucracy headquarters. We really focus on the children and the youth and to make sure that we make a difference on the ground. We are a very lean fund with 30 staff positions, and we are hosted by UNICEF and an entity within the United Nations, but we work very closely with private sector and civil society. We are positively disruptive fund. We're here to change things.
And so it's really admirable the way that you've approached it in terms of put your arms around everyone, engage them in this discussion. Tell me, what are the lessons you've learned about making an effective argument? So when you took from 2% to 4%, the allocation that countries spend and dedicated towards this, what is the argument that breaks through, and how do you make it?
Well, I mean, there are different ways of arguing. One is to shaming and blaming, and another one is to, begging. And I think neither will bring the result, because the desired result, because eventually we have to inspire and we have to bring clarity. When you raise awareness and understanding of an issue and you bring clarity to it, and you do it in an inclusive way that doesn't condemn nor beg, you get people with you when they see, because everyone wants to do what is right. So I think our argumentation has been very much, it's been to bring, what does education mean besides literacy skills and math skills? Yeah. It really means humanity. What is the situation on the ground? Make everyone understand what the reality looks like on the ground, to be in this extreme poverty, abject suffering. You have to wake some compassion, and then you bring the figures and the numbers. And I think the figures and the numbers themselves bring everyone to shame. But because everyone wants to help, then we offer them the opportunity. What we need to do on our part, and I think has been an important aspect of our argument, is that we show for results, and we are action-oriented, and we show that we are not a dusty bureaucracy, we are not moving slowly, we cut the crap, and we really move for people, and I think that inspires. And so I think it's been the results, and it's been the connection to the reality, and it's been to appeal both to the head and the heart. You have to appeal to the entire aspect of your potential strategic donor partners. And I'm very excited that we also have gotten private sector with us. I think that's the future. I'm very grateful to our strategic donor partners and the foundations, but we now have a growing number of private sector, and I think that is very exciting. And I think they will only go where they see results, and so will our strategic government partners as well. Everyone is looking for results and inspiration.
Thank you so much for that, Yasmine. That's a very comprehensive response in terms of you have to inspire people. I really enjoyed hearing that. With regards to, you'd have seen that I've flagged up on the screen, there are viewers from all over the world that are joining this live stream. Can you tell us, in terms of, with regards to refugee populations around the world, where, what are the hotspots, as it were?
Well, you have the largest refugee population today. You have the Rohingyas. That is, the Rohingyas is a true hotspot because they cannot return under the current circumstances, and it of course it's also very difficult for Bangladesh as the host government with their own challenges, and at the same time the Rohingyas have suffered tremendously, and they need the discrimination and the expulsion and their flights. So they are one of the hotspots, and the fact that we need also to provide public education to them. Right now, it's all done at an informal level. You have Lebanon has been a great host country for Syrian refugees, even Iraqi, but especially Syrian refugees. And now Lebanon faces its own financial economic challenges. And at the same time, on top of it, they have refugees that they have to care for, in which they do. And then you have Uganda that hosts all refugees coming from South Sudan. It's so difficult to classify and say that the situation is worse than that. The fact that so many countries who are struggling with their own challenges are the biggest host countries for refugees, I think is a reminder to the rest of us in Europe and elsewhere that the numbers of refugees that we take in is marginal compared to what neighboring countries in the Middle East and in various parts of Africa and Southeast Asia are hosting, and that should humble us.
Can I ask you a question? And this comes out of my ignorance more than anything else, and I admit that. How ingrained, what I mean by that is, if a child goes to a refugee school in a refugee camp, are they likely to make it out until they're an adult into outside of the refugee camp? What I mean by that is, what is the average amount of time that someone stays in one of these camps, in one of these schools?
Well, today, because conflicts are protracted, you look at a country like Afghanistan, they have been in conflict since 1979. There's been several conflicts. So you have refugees in Pakistan that have been there through generations. But I take an example for refugees hosted by Jordan in the refugee camps there, and I've seen them and met with them. They have access to public schools.
Okay.
So they attend public schools while they are in the camps, and we see some incredible students who move through the lower grade, through secondary grade, and then are accepted into university as #1 students. So these are positive examples. But the way conflicts continue in a very protracted way, it says that refugees, an average for a refugee today is anything between, I think, 15 to 17 years. So certainly they need to be entitled to 12 years of education, because they may most likely won't go back any time before that. So those who can attend public schools, there's a continuity and often a sense of quality. For those who attend non-formal education, quality may not always be at the level desired. And if it's purely humanitarian, it certainly won't offer the continuity. That's why it's so important to bring education investments both from a development perspective to ensure sustainability and from a humanitarian perspective to ensure speed. But it can't be a purely humanitarian action to provide education, because then it becomes very unpredictable.
Yasmine, in terms of, a lot of the people on the T4 platform are involved in education in schools as teachers, as school leaders, and in our personal capacities. What do you think we can do to further your agenda?
I think everyone can do something. It depends what your role is. Whether if you're a teacher, and the teachers are carrying the biggest burden, because the teachers in conflict countries and countries of refuge are also victimized themselves by the conflict. So they have to deal with their own trauma and burdens and losses and dispossession, and at the same time they have to be a role model for the children and the youth. So they are the ones that are probably put with the strongest burdens. I would say empower the teachers and find and education cannot wait. We invest in teachers especially, and during COVID-19 we made a decision. Even if we would have schools were closed, we would still pay the salaries of all the teachers, because we don't want them to lose their jobs because of COVID-19. So I would say invest in the teachers. And if you are a private sector partner, consider contributing with financial resources or with technology or other products that can help us advance education in the most affected parts of the world. As I said, it depends who you are, where you are, what your expertise is, but there's a place for everyone to serve.
Well, that's a really good prompt, and I would suggest that those of us who are involved in education and want to get involved, the first thing that we do is actually go and learn about Education Cannot Wait's work as a fund, and then find opportunities, as Yasmine says, as supporting other teachers and school leaders in these contexts, because solidarity, I think, what I hear is quite important. To make sure that people remain motivated and actually have recourse to best practice and resources, as it were. Thank you for that, Yasmine. Yasmine, in terms of, you've had a number of different roles, and right now you're the executive director of Education Cannot Wait. You will have seen so many great examples of leadership, or you would have at least had your own learnings through your own journey. What I was keen on was for you to talk us through 3 important lessons that you've learned about leadership that we could apply as those who are seeking to improve ourselves or to upgrade our operating system, as it were. So can you give me your first leadership lesson? And just to make sure that I tell everyone as well, is that I only asked you this question to prepare for it 10 minutes before this live stream started. So please forgive me for that. But, tell us about your first leadership lesson and what you learned from that.
First of all, let me say I'm still learning. And that is
Great
important.
leadership lesson.
Yeah. I think we learn for as long as we live, but it's important to be attentive and be able to look at yourself impartially, I think one of the most important leadership lessons that I've learned over the years, and I think, as you say, you learn to become a leader. You don't study to become a leader alone. You have to learn and experience it. Is that as a leader, you have to be humble, but you also have to develop a confidence in yourself to the extent that you can allow others to shine. You see, a very insecure person wants to shine only, and that can never make a great leader. A great leader needs to be so certain in their own leadership role that they can allow others to be leader and can recruit strong personalities that they don't feel threatened by because they have it in themselves. I often see, there are tendencies sometimes to you recruit someone who is a little bit less, so that you don't get threatened, and you're trying to keep some hierarchic order and the traditional way, I am the boss. I'm anything but that. I believe in very flat structures. And I love to see people shining around me, because I know when they shine, it will automatically reflect on me, but I am not so important. What is important, it will reflect on those we serve, on our results, what we're achieving. So the more leader, there's a saying that goes that a great leader does not create more followers, but create more leaders. So I think develop and nurture your inner certainty in yourself with all your imperfections to such an extent that you can allow others to shine and lead and become great. That is, I think, the number one leadership lesson I have learned.
So can I ask you before you go on to number two, just to make it real, which leaders do you think do that the best? So let's name a few that you think do that really well.
To let others shine?
Yeah.
I think I think my own boss is like that. I am the chair of the high-level steering group is Gordon Brown, and he is like that. He always pushes, his people at the front. He doesn't have this need to be at the front all the time, and he comes through like that. But I can see it in many, behind me, I have Martin Luther King, who was one of my role models when I grew up, who can get everyone with you because you allow them to be strong and shining. Nelson Mandela was a leader like that, I think great leadership implies great humility. And I think that's the lesson we all have to work with, to be humble. I look at you, Vikas. You're a leader. I'm incredibly inspired by you. I know you don't like to hear that, but I think you yourself personify that kind of leadership. So yes, I think, and then if I look at women, there are many beautiful, strong women leaders out there. I think Eleanor Roosevelt was one of those who came up with the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. I think take some other great Alice Walker, who was a great, African American leader. Oprah Winfrey is like that. There are so many of them. They're strong.
So tell me about your next lesson.
Well, and this is, of course, a lesson for any leader, but every leader needs to have a vision. I mean, there's clearly the number one. Without a vision, you can't lead others. And that means that you have to have the courage, the imagination, and the internal trust and compass to look beyond the dots around you and see the bigger picture and go there and inspire others to come with you. Even, and this often happens with great leadership, when people think, oh my gosh, become realistic now, or you're going a bit too far. And to have the courage to withstand that kind of doubt and pressure. It doesn't mean that you should not listen to others, but you need a vision. But having a vision is not enough. And I think this is important because we often speak about vision, but that alone is not enough. You also have to, and this is my favorite area, you have to be able to connect the dots, and you need to see the details and the dots and how they connect towards that vision. So you have to have a sense for detail, and you have to have an ability to connect those details to create that vision. Most importantly, and this is where I see the word failing at times, is that we have a great vision, we understand the details, but to get there, instead of taking logical steps to get to that vision, whenever we are faced with something challenging or something scary, instead of going the steps to the vision, we go, I go there instead, and then I go there, and then I go there, and then we fall down because we're so scared of making those decisions that will take us to the vision. And I think that is one reason we have not achieved universal human rights in the Declaration of Human Rights. That's why we are still, not where we should be according to the UN Charter of peace and security. I think we want a great vision, but we are not willing to walk all the way or take the decisions required. So leadership requires courage also.
So in the same vein, with regards to your point about visionaries as well as people who actually make things happen, make decisions, and make positive steps, who are the current set of visionaries that inspire you?
To the living or past?
Living.
Living. Well, there's so many in the past. I wrote a book about that. Here's my book, by the way. I didn't plan to show it to everyone. The Case for Humanity.
Wonderful.
Where I brought, this is how it looks. I brought together, I've been most of my life in the UN or around the UN.
Yeah.
And over the years, and I joined in the late 80s, over the years, I was like, I need more of the great personalities. I want Martin Luther King here. I want Eleanor Roosevelt here. I want Beethoven, the great composer here. I want the great artists. I want the ones that the poets,
Sure.
Bob Kennedy, all of them. So I created this imaginary UN Security Council session, and I invited all of them, 100. And the agenda was the case for humanity. That was the one-day agenda, and I used their quotes and their sayings to tie together that discussion, that debate for one day, where they are in the UN speaking about these issues, using authentically what they once said. And I realized they all think alike. So many of them have passed. Some of them are still alive, but I think my great role models were precisely Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Eleanor Roosevelt and Simone Beauvoir and all of those great thinkers and doers.
But today, Yasmine, today.
I would be so unfair of me I think there are many great leaders in many of our government partners that we work with that I really like, and I think that they are doing great. I mean, I think many of the development ministers who are part of Education Cannot Wait, I find them very inspiring. But I would say my greatest role models today are the young people that I meet.
Wonderful.
In Chad, in Central African Republic, in Ethiopia, who suffered tremendously. And I see in them that glimmer of hope. I see in them the edginess, saying, we want an education. My dream is to be a lawyer. My dream is to change things. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a teacher. And I see these young women, and they are edgy and they're tough. They are my leaders.
How inspiring. Tell us about your last leadership lesson, your third leadership lesson.
Well, I think, I have several. I say one thing is you have to drive for results, and you have to be competitive as a private sector mindset. Service is not, just sitting down and feeling sorry for people. You have to run for your life for them as if it was your own life or your own child. So I think that is, and as a leader, you have to inspire that in the people around you, that we have to act as if the whole world was on fire. Okay. And we have to act, somebody once said, who was that? I think she was a nun, and she once said, if we were to become who we truly are, we could set the whole world ablaze. The potentials that we have.
Yes.
And I think that's how we should always think. When we see a crisis, we see suffering, the leadership role we have is to act as if the world is on fire, and we're going to fight that fire with our own blaze, So that's one thing. And by doing that, we set an example. But we have to have that sort of mentality that we have to win the human race. So there is a sense of competing with ourselves to achieve high. The other one is, and this is very important when you work in big bureaucracies, never personalize an issue. Never personalize an issue. So you see bad work, you criticize the work, not the person. Everything you have to remove the person and just look at the issue. And I think for anyone working in a bureaucracy, an institution, the moment you start personalizing, you lose the quality of the work. And so I think that's very important. But when you look at the issues, and I'm not afraid of that, put the highest standards. Empower people to become better, empower them to do good work, but never settle for mediocrity. Don't. Not if you want to change the world.
Yasmine Sherif, thank you so much for your time today. I know that I am inspired by this conversation, as always. And I implore everyone to please go to educationcannotwait.org, and also follow Yasmine and the organization on social media. I have found this live stream to be massively inspiring. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much to you, Vikas. You are inspiring, and it's been a privilege and a pleasure to be here and to be here together with you. Thank you, Vikas.
You're very kind.